So that time frame between having him in my first camp with Jamaica was 4 months. And I remember it wasn't like, I came in and it was like, oh, we'll monitor, how you're doing and stuff. It was like, no, I need to like make this roster.
Welcome to the Two Wash-Ups, One Pro podcast, where today we have a very special guest, one of our most accoladed guests yet, former Seminole, where she quite literally broke my heart and became a national champion, was an All-American in the process. She's currently a star forward for the Washington Spirit, Jamaican national team, but most importantly, a soon-to-be mama of two, Cheyna Matthews. Welcome.
Woo!
Welcome.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thanks for joining. So first, before we even get into questions, how are you doing? And we know you're pregnant. COVID is, isolating all of us. I can imagine going through a pregnancy during this is not too enjoyable, but how's it been going with the baby?
Honestly, it's been pretty good. I think I've kept myself really busy with just different projects and running after a 2-year-old. But I mean, the days are never the same. I could definitely say that. I think a lot of people maybe struggled with like the mundaneness or like, kind of going through the motions day to day, kind of know what to expect. With a 2-year-old, it's just like I never know what the day's gonna bring or like what new is gonna happen. So he's definitely kept it interesting. We have a 2-bedroom condo right now that we're living in. We're building our home.
Are you in Nashville?
In Nashville, yep.
Awesome.
So we're building right now, which, that process is like, you just want to make sure everything is right. And so it takes a long time to kind of like finalize some things. So it's been cool to kind of be able to have a little bit more time to focus on that. And I think everything's been good, working out, training a few little girls. In the meantime, to kind of like stay around the sport and all that. So it's been pretty cool.
Well, that's great. So we like to start by kind of having our interviewer talk to us briefly about how did you get into soccer? When did you start playing? And can you recall a moment in your early career where you were like, okay, I'm in love with this sport enough that I want to pursue it at a high level?
Sure. So I'm one of 5. I'm the 4th of 5. So I've got 2 older brothers and an older sister, and then I have a little sister. But my parents started all of us in soccer. I guess that's like the first sport, and neither one of my parents played soccer, so it was a little bit confusing. But that was the first sport that they started all of us off in, and some of my siblings would just pick flowers in the field. Some of them, were ready to go home. They're like, I don't like being hot. I don't like being outside that long. They'd find reasons, when they're younger to kind of navigate themselves away from it. But I was really the only one that enjoyed it. And I look forward to games. I look forward to practice at a young age, probably around like 5 when I started. And it wasn't until I think I'll probably say 8th grade or whenever I started travel ball, like club soccer. That's when I was like, you know what? I think I want to play in college, And I think that was probably as far as it went. I never really had dreams of being a professional player. I admired the professional players I was able to see. Like, since I grew up in Atlanta, the Atlanta beat was like a big deal. Like, we would go to all the games. I would see, different players. I even saw Marta playing there, Bry, Scurry, the list goes on. So team was stacked. It was fun to go to soccer games and stuff. And I was like, wow, like maybe that could be me one day. So I had that little bit, but I wasn't really just like, I'm going to be a professional soccer player.
Yeah.
It really wasn't until I got to college, my freshman year, that I was like, I really want to pursue this at a high level.
Because I'm damn good.
Because my freshman, so when I committed to, because I went to Vanderbilt my first 2 years, but when I committed in like 10th grade. I knew I wanted to go to college, get school paid for, which that was like number one priority. I'm like, okay, my parents are having to pay for me to travel and do club and all this stuff. It's like, I really want to get I want to go where I have a full scholarship. So I felt blessed and fortunate enough to really be able to have options in that sense. But I knew at that time, I was like, okay, I'm going to get a 4-year degree out of this, make the most of it, and then get a good job.
Right. Well, I
And
know that.
sell.
Yeah. Well, we have an interesting connection in our stories, obviously, because I also went to Vanderbilt. And crazy enough, we transferred at the same time, and then we met in the national championship because you went to Florida State and I went to Virginia.
Crazy.
It is kind of a crazy, weird way that ended up. But we obviously know you had an incredible collegiate career, both at Vandy and at Florida State. Can you walk us through a little bit about, you touched on it briefly there, but what made you choose Vandy, and then ultimately, because there is risk involved with transferring, what kind of gave you the confidence to transfer, 2 years into your career, so only having 2 years of eligibility left, and deciding to go to Florida State at that point?
So, like I was saying, I committed pretty early to a coach named Ronnie Woodard. So she was the head coach at the time. I followed her career or did a lot of research. She went to Duke, seeing that, all the accolades that she had, and having a head coaching position. I was like, this is who I want to play for. Like, I'm really excited about this. So on the soccer side, I was like, okay, I feel like I'm going to get a lot from this program. I'm going to develop. I'm going to get a great education, which at the time I wanted to do pre-med.
Bit different.
Take a moment. More silence. That was here today, gone tomorrow. Like, some people were able to do it. I don't know how, but hey, whatever. So I was like, oh, the Medicine Health Society program. Like, I did all this research. So it was just really the best fit as far as like what I was going to get out of 4 years for what I wanted to go to school for. I really wasn't too much. Oh, and then also I did want to make sure that I was going to a program where I would actually play as a freshman. Whereas like I wasn't really sure with some programs that are like, you got to work hard, which I understand. But I'm like, okay, where am I going to have the most likely chance to come in and be able to play? Because I just, I never got used to a dynamic where I wasn't playing much. So that was also a huge factor. But my freshman year, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks before preseason, I get a call from Ronnie, and she was telling me that she was stepping down from her position, and that, she wanted to see her child grow. Now that I'm older and I have kids, I totally understand how important it is to kind of, be available for your kids and want to be around and desire to be around and wanting to, like, I guess, minimize travel and things like that. All the things that, being a part of a women's soccer program would pretty much have you doing. So she told me that, and I was devastated, obviously, super sad, but then also a little bit confused because I'm like, okay, well, now what? Like, is there a new coach? Like, who is the new coach? How does this work out? They said that at the time, if I wanted to go elsewhere, I could, but at this point, scholarships are far and few in between. So I'm like, well, this is where I have to go. This is kind of like where my cards have set me this far. So ended up going. I think I did well my freshman year. This was also when the NWSL had their inaugural season. So up to this point, all through high school, I never thought that if I wanted to play professionally, I could do that in the United States. I was like, if you want to play pro, you have to go overseas, kind of. And so there's this new league. I've got this new coach. I've had a good freshman year. So I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm taking this more seriously now because I feel like it's attainable for me to play professionally. And during my sophomore season, that fall, I found myself thinking a lot about my development and what the next 3 years were gonna be like, if I had a chance to be drafted, if I was putting myself in the best position to, pursue the NWSL. And I came to a point where I kind of realized, throughout the season and how things were going, I'm like, I love this school. I love my friends. I love, what I'm doing academically, but I don't feel like I'm going to develop the way that I feel like I need to for the next couple of years to really prepare myself for a professional career. And so that's kind of how the decision came. It was really scary, obviously, because the way it works is you have to get your release. Tina, you have to get your release before you're even able to contact coaches. And so it was kind of almost a leap of faith. I got a little bit of advising from, my club coach, and he kind of assured me, hey, like, I'm sure somebody will be able to, provide you a scholarship given what you've done the past 2 years. As a freshman and sophomore, you wouldn't have anything to worry about. Just go through with getting the paperwork. So I had the encouragement from my coach, and Ronnie and I actually kept a pretty good relationship. So I even kind of talked to her about it a little bit, and she was kind of like, yeah, I'm sure you'll be able to find another scholarship. And so the second I got that release, it was like, wow. I felt really blessed to like have that many different offers, and like teams wanting me to visit and stuff like that. So it was kind of like the recruiting process all over again, which became really stressful because you could only take, I think, 5 visits. And I went to UNC. I went to.
It was still butthurt. Just so
I'm very upset. I remember you coming in, and Anson was like, "Listen, guys, like this kid, like we gotta get her. Like this kid is a stud. Like, and we had a ton of like not a ton, but we've had recruits and stuff. But like over the 4.5 years that I was there, like this kid from Vanderbilt, like if we don't get her, she's gonna be pounding goals against us." And I was like, sick. That happened. That definitely happened. But yeah, no, I blatantly remember, and then like you choosing FSU, which obviously worked out for you. But on our end, it was devastating because I was like, oh, this kid is not with us, but against us. I was butthurt. I was very butthurt, but obviously.
It was it was a really tough time, a really tough decision. Ultimately, it came down to my comfort with how I would fit into a certain style of play, and kind of what was expected of me, and like how I would fit in like to a specific like, style. And so with FSU, I knew they had just at the time when I committed, I think they were still in the playoffs. So they hadn't even played like in the national championship or anything yet. But I remember watching the national championship after I committed, and I'm like, man, if they win, like I could have made the wrong decision, like, cause then it's like, okay, if it ain't broke, you don't fix it. Like you guys just won a national championship. Like what do you need? What needs to be fixed? And so, or what needed to be, added. And so, they ended up losing to UCLA that year. Before I got there. And I think it was 1-0 or I'm pretty sure it was 1-0 or something like that. Or maybe they went to PKs. I can't remember.
I think Cody Lavrusky scored. I know that sounds, I think they
won. Okay, so it was 1-0. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as a forward, I'm like, okay, well, they're so close. Like it made me feel a little bit better about or excited even about like being a part of their program. Like, okay, well, if I go there, then maybe I can like help facilitate some goals, So it ended up working out, obviously, winning that next year. But it was a tough, Tina. We met like 3 times that year.
Mia Fields, man, I have dreams about her left. Girl's never scored a left-footed goal in her life, but that day she did.
Oh, I mean, she couldn't have put it anywhere else.
Yeah, like, I was like, okay, I'll take it. At least it was a hard-fought game, and
Yeah, and it was hot. oh gosh, I think we all remember how hot it was
in December. Yeah.
I mean that maybe worked to our advantage a little bit, being that we were from Florida, but
yeah, halftime was
Boca was
quite
a
a
little
journey.
bit different. Yeah.
It's crazy. So obviously you had a stellar career at Vandy, and then really felt like you made a national name for yourself, went to FSU, become a national championship, all ACC first team. I remember you just scoring loads and loads of goals and me being heartbroken. But can you talk a little bit about how you feel your game took a jump at FSU developmentally, where you kind of were like, okay, now this was the right move for me. I feel like I can really go places with this.
Sure. So the work really started like that spring. So I did a mid-year transfer, which is like super uncommon, I think. But it was important for me to kind of get there and adjust before a fall season. And so I ended up transferring midway through my sophomore year. And that's when the work started. I got to see all the details of trainings, of I think even movement off the ball, because I was playing the 9 at the time. So I have like defensive responsibility. Like, what is this? So it's like all these new concepts that really helped me, especially in the NWSL, because like I have to mark up with people like Jess McDonald on corner kicks, even in North Carolina. I'm like, crap, I gotta like tap into what I learned at Florida State, So there are little moments that I remember like that, and then even just composure in front of the goal, just little things that I never really took into account until I did get to FSU. So the coaching staff is like amazing. They really take their time to show you the film. They record the practices. They're able to show you examples from other games, from the pros, from other leagues, even like Champions League, things like that. They're pulling clips from everywhere. And so I was really able to sharpen the mental side of my game, and just become a smarter player. So I think that was the jump. And then obviously the ACC is different than the SEC in the sense that I think it is a faster style of play, and there's more passes, there's more connection, versus like I felt like in the SEC a lot of our games were transitional, which worked for me because I'm fast. But what happens when you have to break a team down? And so having those tools going into the pros was like, it was golden. It really helped pay off over the time.
Yeah. Well, so you obviously, you get drafted by Washington. You are honestly very successful. You're earning starting time, having success in the league, which we know is not easy. And then, frankly, even myself shocked, it comes out that you're pregnant and you're going to, have your child and take time off. And I don't know if it was planned or how the timing went, but knowing you and knowing that you also had hopes of being a part of the Jamaican national team, you had kind of a tight window there in terms of like returning, which I'm sure was part of the mindset. Can you first talk about kind of learning that news and realizing what was ahead of you as not only becoming a new mom, but realizing that you wanted to return after the fact, so you'd have to kind of train in a certain way for that 9-month span. And then ultimately, how did you get into that mindset of like returning to play? What was the process once you had Josiah and had to start, let your body rest, but also kick it back up so that you could get fit in a 6-month time?
Sure. Cool. It was definitely not planned. We had we actually had a surprise, well, not a surprise, it was secret marriage for like 8 months before our wedding, which only a few of my teammates knew about. We knew that he obviously was like playing NFL football, so he's busy just as much as I am. But I knew after the season, after that year, I think it was like 2017, that we were going to move in together and, kind of start planning for our wedding and all this stuff. Well, in the process, we were kind of like, why don't we just get married? We know we're having this wedding. The only reason why we're having the wedding when we are is because our seasons are literally the whole year. And February was the only month that we both had off.
Wait, I just need to add one thing though about you and Jordan. Jordan was, if people don't know this, Jordan Matthews, your husband, was the star receiver at Vandy. And I remember when I was at Vandy, it may have been Aaron or somebody, I said, those two have a connection. She's like, no, they're best friends. They're not. I'm like, are you because I think I asked someone, I was like, are they dating? They're like, no, they're just best friends. And when it probably was a surprise to other people, when you came out that you got married, I was like, I knew that was coming for 5 years. They were like this at Vanderbilt. So anyway, I just wanted to add that because it wasn't even, if you knew, it wasn't a surprise.
Everyone thought when we were in school, they're like, those two have something. They're just not telling anyone. It's like, we really didn't. We really were just friends for a long time. And then when I got drafted to DC, and he was only an hour and a half, 2 hours on a train up the road in Philly, it was like a no-brainer. Like, we're too close. I could just tell, and he was coming down like every weekend whenever, because it was a spring, so he still had workouts during the week, but they had like Thursday to Saturday or Sunday off, and he was always in DC. And like, there's this funny story. This is when Western New York was Western New York. It wasn't North Carolina, or it was actually, Buffalo. I told him, I was like, yeah, my game's in Western New York this weekend. This is like one of my first games. He's like, oh, well, I'm in Philly. Like, New York's not far. I'm going to come. I'm going to just take the train. When they're planning, I don't know. They don't look at like time or even like the actual time it says you're going to be on a train or anything. So he didn't realize it's take 2 trains, and they're both like 4 hours each. From Philly to
Western New York.
So he was there and he's like, yeah, I didn't know it was that long of a trip. So I commend him for kind of sticking that out, and he ended up making the train ride back, but he was prepared at that point. But it was just funny how intentional he was about like our dating life. So, I mean, we were best friends for so long. When we decided to just go ahead and get married in that summer, I went up there for like a random weekend in June, and I think it was like the one weekend I didn't have a game. And so I drove up to Philly, got those marriage papers. We had a nice little ceremony in a garden. And it was just us two and our pastor who married us. But yeah, we were like, oh, we'll just keep it under wraps, No one needs to know until we, have this wedding, like whatever. Then I ended up pregnant like 6 months into our marriage, and I'm like, crap, like we've still got this wedding, like and I have no idea how my body's gonna react to like having a child, so I'm like, I already got this wedding dress, like am I even gonna fit in February, like what's gonna happen? So we're freaking out, and we don't want anyone to know. So literally, like, we didn't tell his parents. No one knew until after the wedding that I was 3 months pregnant already.
That's insane.
Yeah.
But if you know Cheyna, she didn't look she probably looks like me right now. Like, she didn't look 3 months pregnant.
I got to go on my honeymoon, and I still had abs. I'm like, yeah, it's okay. Like, everything's good. This is great. Even now, like, it's so funny. It's my second pregnancy, and some people are like, when they find out how far along I am, they're like, wait, how is that possible? I'm like, I don't know. It's just how I carry. I don't know. The baby grows. I don't.
Was he a big baby, like, when he came out?
He was 7. Yeah, he was like, he was average. He was like 7 pounds, 5 ounces. So.
And you were looking like $1 million carrying just, damn.
It was just all baby. And it's funny, like, people wouldn't know until I like turned around or turned to the side, because like width wise, I stay the same, but it's just like it just goes out. Like, I don't know. I don't know if it'll be the same this time. No, it's the same. I've been
Talk about your training. How are you training during this?
So the only thing I kind of monitor really is like my heart rate, and I kind of just slow my workouts down. I haven't really had to modify anything really strenuous, except running. Like I just can't run because the baby's sitting so low. That's the only thing I haven't been able to really do. But as far
I'm
as
sure that'll come back fast.
what'd you say?
I'm sure that will come back fast.
Yeah. No, it was pretty the it was a lot of core work when you're coming back because you have like no core strength. It's like it just disappears. Like I couldn't even hang for 10 seconds after I had JoJo, and I'm like, whoa. So that time frame between having him in my first camp with Jamaica was 4 months. And I remember it wasn't like, I came in and it was like, oh, we'll monitor, how you're doing and stuff. It was like, no, I need to like make this roster. So I had to do really well on my fitness test. So we had like the beat test. I ended up doing really well on it. They were surprised. But it was like the two trainings a day, or like, the scrimmage in the evening. But I just adjusted. I just stay hydrated.
Like, I gotta ask though, because
yeah.
Having two sisters going through pregnancies, and knowing what the hormone situation is after the fact, were you, even training and keeping the mindset of like, I'm gonna come back, right? Yeah. At any point, did you question like, am I done? And also, were you ever fearful of the like body changes that, because everyone knows you're incredibly fast, but sometimes when your hormones change, you can lose that in time. Was there any like fear in that? How did you kind of keep positive and hopeful, I guess, through the process?
So I had a really encouraging trainer. I think that was half the battle. Like there were days where I came in the process of like coming back, and I just felt horrible. Like I had no sleep because, I've got a new baby. I'm eating every hour because I'm also breastfeeding, and it's like, it takes up, I thought I was hungry during pregnancy. You're even more hungry when you're like trying to feed a child from your own body. And so I just remember being like some days run down, like just not feeling like working out. And my trainer, Matt, he was so good about modifying my workouts where I always left feeling good. And so I don't know how he did it. I really don't. But I literally would leave workouts like I can take over the world. Like, so I was really fortunate in that sense where I didn't really have too much doubt other than like just like the time frame, like, oh, like, am I going to be ready for, camp in January? Am I going to be ready for the NWSL season? Am I going to be up to par with the other players when I get back? Even my agent at the time was kind of like, are you sure you still want to play? I'm like, so whenever I would hear something like that, it kind of, I think, motivated you even more, because I'm like, no, one, I've seen it done before. So like, I've talked to Sid LaRue, I've talked to, different players in the league that have come back from having children. And it's like, one thing that they've told me is like, okay, just kind of take it a day at a time. And so I kind of had that approach. I had a good camp after having my first camp back at 4 months and doing well and feeling just as fast, feeling, all the work that I put in my trainer, really having it had paid off. It was encouraging. I actually came back faster, which is
that ain't right.
Which is crazy because when I was with the Spirit, you have like the GPS monitors, and they're able to track like, your times, your how fast you're running and stuff like that. My GPS times were fast.
What was your speed? I'm curious. What was your speed?
So so 1 year they did, I think, miles per hour.
Uh-huh.
And I was at, I think, 22. And then
what was your meters?
He's out running golf carts.
I'll have to get all that. I'll have to get all that information.
So curious.
But I know for a fact, I remember asking, okay, what are my times this year versus last year? They're like, oh, this is better. I'm like, oh, okay.
Did you ever go ahead?
I did feel stronger though too, because it's just like, I don't know. I felt stronger, but I don't know if it was because I paid so much attention to the training and the fitness aspect, where I don't know if I really did that before, if that makes sense.
Interesting. So you almost feel like it kind of like sharpened other parts of your game. So then that you come back and then all of a sudden you're even farther along in your strength than you were before.
Yeah, like I was able to do like, I don't remember the last time I could just crank out 25 push-ups just on a whim, and I was able to do that. I wasn't even doing this in college. Like what?
Mom
Like
strength.
power cleaning, but
Mom, dude, I think it's mom strength.
Mom
You get
strength for
pregnancy
sure.
and all that, you're like, what can
you
I
should,
can face the world?
you see me
I
now.
mean-
People are like, can I carry your groceries to your car? I'm like, no. I'm like 2 hands, and I'll give like JoJo the smallest thing. Like, carry this.
Make yourself
like
useful.
dragging it on the ground. He like hasn't really quite mastered picking up the bags, but he tries.
He'll get there. So you obviously made this amazing comeback to be a part of the Jamaican World Cup squad. Can you talk about being a brand new mom with that while pursuing your dream, while managing your schedule with your husband? Like that just has to be like, did you ever feel like overwhelmed, or like were you just a great Google Calendar person? Like did you just get it all straight?
I'll tell you who my Google Calendar was. It's definitely Jordan. So there's yin and yang, that whole thing. Like he is definitely that. Like he's very, very neat and tidy when it comes to even our house. Like if he sees something out of place, he has no problem putting it away. So he kind of helped navigate that. And even with his schedule, he was busy like every day of the week except Mondays. And he would literally come with me to workouts and watch our son. That's like awesome. While I train on his one off day, even when I started camp with the Spirit. So like preseason, I was a little bit overwhelmed because I hadn't found anybody to care for JoJo yet. We were kind of like playing kind of playing it by ear, because I had done like the care.com, but I just didn't feel comfortable as a new mom. Like I don't know these people, and I'm like going online trying to like find somebody to watch my kid. I don't know how comfortable I am with this. And Jordan was the same. So he would get up in his off season, he'd work out at like 4:30 in the morning, go do his training, come home, get home by 8:00 so that I could leave to go and be with the Spirit all day. So his days literally went from, with JoJo, 4:30 to 4:30. Like he was, but I left at 8, and in camp preseason, you're not able to come home in between your trainings and things like that. So I was gone literally all day from 8 to like 3 or 4, and he would be up from 4. Second he gets home, he's like on the clock with him. Granted, JoJo was smaller, so he wasn't as active. So like he was able to like, okay, sleep. He slept like, I think at this point he was still taking like 2 naps a day or something like that. So that kind of helped him be able to like, okay, he's gonna nap this time, I'm gonna nap.
Sleep.
But it really took a lot of sacrifice on both ends. And there were some moments where it was a little bit overwhelming. But our parents were also like really good about coming into town, like especially when I had to travel for a game or something. They'd come in and spend the weekend with JoJo, so he didn't have to travel. There was only maybe a handful of times he traveled with me. But other than that, it just, that the support team was really, I mean, they all knew the goal, and that was like be able to go to the World Cup. And the team had already qualified in October, so we knew that they were going. It was just a matter of, staying healthy, continuing to prepare, be ready for these camps, to make the roster to go. So it all made it worth it, seeing everybody in the stands at the World Cup. And obviously we didn't do as well as we would have hoped, but for that to be our first experience against some really high quality teams, which was like Brazil was our first game in the World Cup. I'm like,
Jeez.
Hey Marta, like,
Yeah.
Hey Virginia.
So, I think it's been a big discussion, kind of, the leagues doing better in terms of evolving and getting you guys more of the needs that you have, especially a lot of you now being moms in the league.
Yeah.
We're curious, like, do you do you feel supported as a mom? What kind of, because even hearing you talk, right? Like, it's not like there's childcare waiting for you. So can you kind of talk about your experience being a mom in the NWSL and what maybe you hope for in terms of improvements of kind of like what they can provide for you guys that would be helpful to kind of be able to do your job, but also
Sure.
have the home life secured in a way?
The first thing is our player standard agreements have no clauses for, maternity leave. They have no clauses for pregnancy. There's just no structure in that sense. So it literally, the teams, what I'm learning now from being in law school is they're acting kind of in good faith, right? Like they're doing everything under this like common law principle type thing, maybe even a little bit above and beyond, since there is no standard, contract or, obligation to hold players to these standards, right? So we end up benefiting or paying me, but I'm on leave. Those kind of things aren't necessarily happening in other leagues as much. It's like, okay, you get a percentage off because you're technically not a part of the team, but we get paid. We're the only league I think that gets paid our full salary for being on leave, which is, obviously a plus. Now, the other side is when you have the child, and obviously you were saying like with the child care and things like that, that's definitely a work in progress. I think that there's stipends that can be given for moms for childcare, just different ways to help. And I think that hopefully they'll get there, especially with, different players now having children and things like that. And I'm sure more players to come will face this, but right now there's no standard. And so I found myself kind of fortunate to have a husband who has a career where he could kind of help support some of those things, like, okay, childcare, obviously, like housing, and other things that maybe I don't have to worry about as a married, being married to a spouse that can provide also, than I would as a single mom. Now, if I was a single mom, I can say I don't know if it would be possible unless I was playing in a city where like my parents lived or somebody, family member type of thing, which I hope that changes, because I hope that like, people having children is not a reason why they can't play, the sport that they want to play or the sport they're good at, the sport they're paid to play. So, there are different things, like obviously, like I think a stipend for moms is even half the battle, because if you have a stipend for childcare or they provide childcare, that's more than half the battle, because a lot of times it comes down to who's watching your kid.
Yeah.
The Spirit, though, they worked out a deal with last year with Lifetime Fitness, which was awesome because they also offer childcare in the memberships, which was something that they kept in mind for me, because it's like, okay, well, when you have to go to Lyft, at least you have somewhere where JoJo can be. But it turned out that we found somebody, a nanny for him that worked awesome. Like there was no need for us to disrupt his day to go and get him and bring him to a gym, so he was very well taken care of, which we were super thankful for. But yeah, I think it starts with the childcare for sure. I think there.
Did you say that you're pursuing a law degree currently?
Yeah. Did you slide that in there?
Yeah. So I started that. Yeah. So
mom, player,
lawyer, taking on
does it all.
So it's actually a master's in legal studies, which the classes are still taken through the law school. But I wouldn't be getting like my JD at the end. I'd be getting like my master's in legal studies, which is, I'm learning all the same stuff, which for me, that was the biggest thing.
Do any of those classes, if you decide to go to law school, will they transfer?
Yeah, so you would have to you'd still have to apply, but you could, ASU specifically, the school that I'm in, you can, in an application process, or like based on how well you do in the classes, like you get you crush and you get like A's in all of them, or, just like a good GPA or good average, then you have an even more likely chance to have those transfer if you want to
Transfer.
pursue. So it was like the best of both worlds. I'm like, oh yeah, this is the program. So I did a lot of research. Obviously, it's hard to find program like a law program that's like solely online, and that's like all I could, really do, especially right now.
Yeah. When did you have that like desire and that urge to want to become studying law and that kind of thing? Was it, man, I'm not playing soccer and I'm bored out of my mind and I want to pursue something, or was it COVID, or like what kind of made you want to decide to go through with that?
Yeah, so honestly, so my husband, I was telling you guys that he's in the NFL. He's had a few periods of time where he's like been a free agent and like still isn't sure if he's gonna like get a call and things like that. So he had kind of been forced to think about different ventures outside of the world of the NFL, outside of actually being a football player. And so he went back to school for his sports administration degree at Northwestern. And so I
Woo!
him to create that. Yeah. Yeah. In school. I think he's almost done. He's got like 2 classes left before he gets his degree. Which
I just finished in June.
Oh, congrats, man.
Yeah, from Northwestern. That's great. I think I heard about him doing it. That's great.
Yeah. He's really enjoyed it. But it's funny because like I never thought like I would be somebody to go back to school, and like with everything that I have going on, I'm like, there's no way. But once I saw him kind of navigate it, he gets home, he does his homework, he does this, he's on the computer, and then he's done. And I'm like, you have a paper due Sunday night and you're in the Super Bowl the same day? Like, what? And, kind of seeing him be able to navigate that, it motivated me a little bit. I'm like, you know what do I want to do to prepare myself for the next stage as well? And so I started doing a little bit of research. I knew from my experiences in the NWSL, and from a representation standpoint, it's like agents and things like that I was like, there are a few things that I would want to do. There are a few things that I would, that I think are needed. And so my desire to kind of work with other athletes came into play. And so I'm like, okay, well, if I want to potentially represent athletes when I'm done playing, and then obviously seeing Jordan's career too, I'm like, man, like I wish I understood the ins and outs of like why this is happening, or why this agent makes this decision, or how they came to this conclusion, or how they negotiated this. I had all these questions, and I'm like, you know what? I can just find out for myself and give myself an opportunity to do the same thing. And so that's kind of where it came. With COVID, we moved to Alabama with my husband's family to just have more help. It's for them to be able to hang out with JoJo, have a little bit more space, because I was telling you guys we're in a condo, got a house and a huge yard, and we're like, you know what, we're gonna quarantine there, and we'll have like 2 more grandparent hands, with the baby. And so it gave me a little bit more time to do my research and apply and have my first class all during the the COVID happenings. So that's kind of how it came to be. I won't finish until I think 2022 or something like that, because I'm not rushing it. I'm only taking like 1 class at a time with everything going on. But
that would make sense.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, I think we definitely need more women in that field, and I know you would do well in it. But speaking of you and your husband, we wanted to talk a little bit too, just as the last piece here, about your foundation together called the Matthews Mission. I'll give you the floor to kind of talk about what that is and what you guys are trying to achieve. But I know you're raising a lot of money and providing a lot for families in the United States. So yeah, can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so Matthews Mission, it was actually funded in 2016. It started with just Jordan's giving, his desire to give, his desire to help families, to help children. And he didn't really have a place for the giving, where he would just give and kind of just like sporadically, like, but he was encouraged to kind of like start a foundation where he has like a centralized place to or even a centralized place for people to get involved or like know exactly kind of like what the causes are, and to draw more awareness to them, right, with our platforms. And so he started in 2016. I didn't really get on board until 2017, which I was able to bring a little bit more of like the women empowerment, different causes that help to support women and their families as well. And so together we were able to kind of come up with different different ideas and different ways to support, which our mission statement is we want to feed, which is feed the homeless, feed the hungry, educate the youth, empower the families, and then donate to whoever is in need. And so that's kind of anything that aligns with that. That's what we're about. And so for Jordan, his focus has been a little bit more of the development of the youth, which is the program that he's worked closely with is called Amend, which is a program for young guys, and kind of help the men that they want to be, learn how to find like things like financial literacy, how to treat women, just different things that maybe they weren't necessarily brought up around. And we were able to kind of combine that with the YWCA, which is a women's shelter that kind of helps, it really helps women with domestic violence situations, whether they need a place to stay, whether they need help getting on their feet after leaving an abusive relationship, just different things like that. So we're able to kind of combine those and work. Those are the two causes that we work, I think, more closely with over the years, where we've had, charity games, we've had different events to help raise awareness for that. But really, we're still, I wish I could say we weren't, but there's still so many different things that we're donating to or we're involved in outside of our foundation that we maybe could do a better job of like honing it back in. But at the end of the day, as long as we're given, that's kind of our hearts. And it's nice to have like